Hello and welcome back to this video channel. I am Chris Philpott and this video channel is the climate emergency and spiritual values. Today we're on program 7. We're still looking at the spiritual underlying causes of climate change and referring to them, but now we're moving on to the effects. The effects of weather. Wherever you live in the world, you know it's been extreme and getting more extreme. All that we mention in this program is based on my book, The Climate Emergency and Green Spirituality Activism, The Last Chance to Change Our Values. So we remind ourselves of some of the spiritual teachings we mentioned before about balance in nature. Because what we're talking about today is hurricanes, typhoons and cyclones, which are the result of imbalance in nature. In Taoism, you remember it's based on the sage who lives in harmony with the Tao, or the way of nature, not disturbing the balance. And as you can see from this symbol, the yin and yang, the negative, the positive, the male, the female, the balances in nature are kept in the correct balance. When they go out of balance, disharmony occurs. So there's an interdependence of all things. We disturb the balance of nature at our peril. And just to remind ourselves, these quotes, Taoist quotes, remind us of that. Mastery of the world is achieved by letting things take their natural course. If you interfere with the way of nature, you can never master the world. That comes from the Tao Te Ching. So Taoism says, leave it alone. Don't imbalance. It's 8,000 years old, this teaching. We seem to have forgotten it. Let's remind ourselves of Islam. Teaches God created perfect harmony. He created the world. It's a perfect world. The Qur'an teaches the way of achieving balance. You only take what you need. You live in moderation, the middle path. You don't waste. You just use what God has given you. Not exploiting nature too much to create imbalances. And this is called mizan, treading the middle path. In Buddhism, in Hinduism rather, in previous programs we've seen that we talked about the Hindu teaching about the cosmos. That there's a universal order in everything called Rita. It governs all forms, functions and processes of the earth. When we humans disturb that universal order, we create imbalance, we create in climate change. One of the great yogis, original teachers who came to the West, was Paramahansa Yogananda. And he went to California and he started a thing called the Self-Realization Fellowship, which was like a course in meditation, yoga, spreading the ideas of yoga to the West. He was quite an enlightened man, as judged by the fact that when he died, his body was in perfect condition after 20 days. This is what he said about living in harmony with nature and balance. In the universal sense, love is the divine power in creation that harmonizes, unites, binds together those who live in tune with this attractive force of love, achieve harmony with nature and their fellow beings, and are attracted to the blissful reunion with God. Let's look at extreme weather in the form of hurricanes, typhoons and cyclones. They're always on the news. Or they make the news anyway. Extreme weather is increasing. These storms are increasing. Let's find out why. The information I've given, as I said, comes from my book. As you saw in program 2, in the physical courses, we're pumping more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And in the last 10 years, these have increased 15% above pre-industrial levels. The last 10 years have been the hottest on record for 150 years. And in 2019, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration found that global temperatures had increased on average to 0.95% degrees centigrade, which is nearly 1 degree. 90% of that heat is absorbed by the oceans, not necessarily the land. There's more ocean than land, remember. But what happens is there's extra heat in the system. Where it was balanced, it's now out of balance. If you measure the water vapor in the air, it's 4% higher than it was 40 years ago. Now when that heat is in the ocean and the atmosphere, it creates a lot of energy to make storms, when they occur, grow stronger. It's the fuel of storms. We know that. In the summer you might find a thunderstorm coming. It's really intense and close heat and you feel it coming. So let's see where these occur. In the Northwest Pacific, they're called typhoons, as you can see from this map. If they form in the Atlantic, you can see from this map, they're called hurricanes. And if they are formed in the South Indian Ocean and South Pacific, they're called cyclones, as you can see from this map. They're the same phenomena. When a tropical storm occurs, you have two factors. One is a cluster of thunderstorms. We've seen these arising in the air in a hot summer when it gets too hot. But you need a surface temperature of 27 degrees centigrade. The warm ocean evaporates, condenses into clouds, releasing a vast amount of heat energy. So you got the heat, and then you've got the rotation of the Earth. As the Earth rotates, it starts to propel that air in a circular motion. Then we get hurricane, typhoon occurring. So the spinning pushes it forward. Typhoons are formed in the Pacific, hurricanes in the Atlantic. In 2013, we can look at an example of a typhoon. Often the Philippines has had a lot of really extreme typhoons, as well as India. The sheer volume of these things. In 2013, Haiyan ripped through the Philippines with speeds of 195 miles an hour winds. It killed 6,000 people and displaced 4 million. This video fully illustrates this, and I'd like to say here on camera that Jim Edds, who made this video, I have great admiration for, risking his life so we can see and capture footage of what it really looks like. And I make no excuses for the graphic detail in this, because this is the reality of climate change, particularly for poorer countries.
It's going crazy out here.
I hooked up with a GMA.
This is the day after the super typhoon. I'm on the waterfront here, just to the right of the Lady Park Resort. Massive storm surge here, a lot of debris. In fact, just behind me, I saw a dead older man and a little baby that's been pulled out of the rubble, and we're waiting for the response to come and pick him up and take him to the morgue. Further down yesterday, right after the storm, I went down to the water, coastline just like this. Lots of debris. Saw a dozen bodies and some that hadn't even, I'm sure, been found yet, because the debris was really thick and heavy, and until you go out and pick every piece of wood and debris out of there, you're never going to know for sure. So we're still finding people out here that didn't survive the storm.
Now I remember this, the IPCC is the body that the UN uses to research climate change, and they say there's going to be an increase by the end of the century you're in, between 2 and 6 degrees centigrade above what level we have now, depending of course on how we deal with the emissions in that time frame. They've also found that the hurricane season, and we're looking at a hurricane now, has got longer by 5 to 10 degrees, 5 to 10 days per degree C of rise. So as the temperature increases, the hurricanes will increase. Now I well remember Hurricane Katrina, because at the time I was in a band called the Eco Warriors, and we wrote a song about it, because exemplified at the time in 2005 what destructive climate change was about. And my late friend Ray Moy wrote a great lyric. He said, "We think we're invincible, the lords of the earth, but ask Katrina what that power is worth." Because believe me, the force of hurricanes, as you'll see in these videos that come, are tremendous. So I was lucky to go to New Orleans some time after the hurricane, and they were still cleaning up in 2011. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and all of Louisiana, that southern part you can see from this map. 2,000 people died. 800,000 homes were destroyed. The whole of New Orleans was flooded because there's these levees, these are walls, which are very good at keeping the sea out. What happens in a hurricane is you get incredible winds and there's a storm surge which pushes water over any barrier, causing tremendous damage. This video fully illustrates this Katrina. So have a look at this, and I'd like to say, before we show it, I'd like to honor the team of tornado trackers that made this possible, this footage, because these people making these videos are putting themselves at risk, so we as the public can see the true effects of climate change.
That have behaved similarly.
Let's talk about you guys holding up in the lobby of that Holiday Inn as Katrina stormed ashore. And as we see, and I think it's incredible to see the storm surge. A lot of people think the water just begins to rise slowly. It actually roars ashore.
Hurricane Katrina showed people a new phenomenon, which you found in flooding in other hurricanes in Texas, for instance, around Houston. Water. A body of water in an urban environment could have sharp metal objects and things that could do you injury, because the New Orleans was flooded. People were on top of houses, roofs, waiting to be rescued. Also, they carry disease. Because sewage gets into the system, sewage works get flooded. So it's another danger, the aftermath of these things. Not just the impact there, it's the aftermath. High winds also, you know, in the States, a lot of buildings are made of timber, they just smash them. Destruction of buildings. This is an enormous actual financial cost. You can see what's happened to these buildings in these photographs. Flooded, destroyed by wind. Moving on, in 2012, Hurricane Sandy caught the eastern part of the United States. You can see this from the map. It was also in Cuba and Haiti. 233 were killed, and in Haiti alone, 200,000 people were made homeless. The irony was, thank goodness Trump administration has changed, but Trump's cynicism was unjustified in this case because even the center of capitalism, New York Stock Exchange, had to close because New York was flooded. And they weren't kitted up to deal with the flooding, the surge of water. The next video will look at this and you can see the power and destructiveness of this hurricane.
It is chaos along the Jersey Shore. The superstorm battering the barrier islands. In the crosshairs, Atlantic City. The road into this seafront town is completely submerged. Damage started early, massive chunks of boardwalk littering the streets. Street after avenue after cul-de-sac inundated.
Hurricanes are getting stronger and more destructive. The scientists see this pattern. And of course that will be logically follow if there's more and more heat put into the oceans. In 2017, Hurricane Irma affected Florida, Cuba, Puerto Rico. You can see from this map. There were 134 killed. Let's think of how big this was, this hurricane. It was one of the biggest, with over 1,000 miles wide. If you can get your head around this, the power in these storms is unimaginable. And they imagined that there was 7 trillion watts of energy released from this storm. And that was twice the amount of energy that was released from all the bombs that were dropped in the Second World War. Also, in 2017, there was Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria really affected Puerto Rico. You can see on this map. Now this is a great example where actually the American government didn't really help. And it was a poor part of America, actually. And when you don't have the infrastructure in a poor country, you get more deaths. However, the reports, the figures I found, it was estimated that 4,645 people were killed. This video really shows you the massive flooding and the power of this hurricane. So have a look at this.
Finish. No more Mashaba. All Mashaba gone. The same whole man he talking. He tell you Mashaba, done is done, every time, all gone. No more house Mashaba. You see that? That's a water. You see whole land coming in the water. No more Mashaba.
In 2019, coming up to date, Hurricane Dorian was the most powerful hurricane recorded in open water. And it basically, well, you see the Bahamas as a nice paradise island, but it was smashed to pieces. Affected the whole of the Bahamas. You can see where it is in this map. I mean, there were wind speeds of 185 miles an hour. The Union of Concerned Scientists did research to hurricanes between 1924 and 2019. And they found there were 35 Category 5 storms. Now 5 is the highest category of hurricane. And in the last 4 years, there have been 5 of these. The hurricane seasons are having more Category 5 hurricanes. The occurrence rate is above the average. And this will continue. Remember, 90% of the heat is taken up in the ocean, right? And the highest recorded sea surface temperature was found in 2019. So there's evidence of a rapid intensification of hurricanes. And they're slower moving, which means they're more destructive. Means they drop more water and they slowly move, and still the wind speed, but they're doing it slower, moving forward slower. And evidence shows that in 2020, it's the most recorded as the most active hurricane season ever. Might not be Category 5 hurricanes, and it's the 5th costliest of all hurricane seasons. It's ironic that the richest country in the world has spent 5 years wasted time denying climate change, when something like this affects them directly. And actually it's bad business, because it costs billions of dollars to clean up after these storms, let alone people losing their jobs, the trauma of people living through these experiences, the disruption of their lives. People who left the New Orleans with Katrina, many have never gone back. It's very difficult to recover from these. It's also very tragic for poorer countries like Puerto Rico, who suffer more. So I would argue that we need to look at spiritual teachings and think about balance, because there's a moral responsibility to stop this death and destruction. Because climate change is intimately connected with imbalances in the atmosphere. And extreme weather is the most poignant form of seeing it. What we don't want to do is to get more and more warming, and you won't just have hurricanes in the ocean, you'll have fireballs which will explode at quite a height, made out of methane, because there's so much methane in the atmosphere. So it will become even more extreme the hotter the earth gets. We must think to do something about climate change and avoid these extremes of weather that may affect those that follow us. Thank you.